My dear Masala podcast fans, I've written a book called Bad Daughter. You surprised by the title? I think not. I've never shared such deeply personal things before. I talk about growing up in poverty. I talk about my father's violence, my mother's murder. I talk about how I turned my pain into power, navigating mental health, sexuality, spirituality, and patriarchy. Bad Daughter is my story of going from Mumbai's slums to New York's billboards. But it's your story too. What's the message of this book? It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what happened to you. You still get to have the life that you want. If you're looking for a book to move you and inspire you to change your life, type in Bad Daughter by Sangeeta Pillai on Amazon or go to my website, baddaughter.co.uk.
One thing I must say, I'm grateful to my husband for kicking me out of the house with nothing except the clothes on my back, and you won't believe it, with only 750 rupees in my bank account, which is less than 10 pounds, but $1 billion worth of dreams and $1 trillion worth of self-esteem once I start building it up.
Vandana Shah is one of India's biggest female divorce lawyers, as well as the author of the bestseller, X-Files. She is also a columnist and social entrepreneur. Vandana was part of the BBC documentary, Invisible Women of India. I loved chatting with Vandana for this episode of Masala Podcast. She is powerful. She is such a supporter of women, and she's incredibly funny too.
Sharam, Badtameez, Chee.
I'm Sangeeta Pillai, and this is the Masala Podcast, a Spotify original where we talk about all those things that we're not supposed to talk about as South Asian women. Sex, sexuality, periods, menopause, mental health, nipple hair, shame, and many more taboos. Join me around my virtual kitchen table as I talk with some incredible women from around the world, exploring what it means to be a South Asian feminist today. I'm with Vandana Shah. Vandana, welcome to the Masala Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Vandana is a very high-profile lawyer, award-winning author. She's been on several media outlets like the BBC and a lot of other places. Vandana, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So currently, thanks to where my life is, I am an author. I am just in the process of writing my third book. I am also a lawyer. I handle a lot of high-profile celebrity divorce cases, if you would like to know, and, which also means Bollywood. It also means big industrialists. But, another part of me my heart will beat for the people who cannot afford good lawyers. And I do a lot of pro bono work. And as part of my pro bono work, I also run a support group for people going through divorces. It was India's first non-judgmental, and I want you to know that it's non-judgmental support group for people going through a breakdown of marriage. And I also write, like I said, and I write for Huffington Post. I've contributed a few articles for BBC. I've also written for, numerous publications, Dainik Bhaskar, Thrive, you name it. So that's like a whole load of articles. So currently, this is where life has placed me. So these are the things I'm doing currently.
So, Vandana, can you tell us a little bit about what brought you on this journey to becoming a divorce lawyer? Because I know it's a little bit personal for you.
Yes, thank you for asking me. And, I actually started my life as wanting to be an advertising executive. I studied advertising and marketing at Xavier's. And prior to that, I also studied psychology. And then, like all Indian girls, I was sort of told to get married. And since I wasn't really seeing anyone, well, actually I was, but I was ditched. So, so everybody said, now you need to get married and we will make the choice. So I got married into a really wealthy family in India. And that is when a part of my life journey started, which I never ever imagined. The marriage was highly abusive. It was not only physically abusive, it was also mentally and emotionally abusive. I had zero self esteem. Today I am talking to you like this. But can you believe it? When I was married, they told me I couldn't even speak properly. And it was so sad. I used to sit and rehearse those sentences in my mind. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps as I say this. It was so sad. I used to rehearse before talking. And it was even sadder for me because I came from a family which really encouraged us girls to be equal to men. And there was no question of inequality. And, I was a state level debate and declamation champion. And I used to write poetry and I used to be a great elocutionist and I used to do drama and arts. And ironically, I used to also be an RJ. And all of this went bust in that marriage. And, the journey was so traumatic. And one thing I must say, I'm grateful to my husband for kicking me out of the house with nothing except the clothes on my back. And you won't believe it, with only 750 rupees in my bank account, which is less than 10 pounds, but $1 billion worth of dreams and $1 trillion worth of self esteem once I start building it up. My divorce lasted for 10 years. I remember telling my lawyer, I don't think once when my in-laws had served the divorce petition on me, and I told my lawyer, I don't think we need to go about this way. I think this is what we should do. What do you think? So she was really dismissive of me, and she said, you know what? You're not a lawyer. When you become one, then you give me your inputs. And I just thought in my mind, hey, I know I'm not a lawyer, but that doesn't mean I'm not intelligent enough or not hardworking enough. So I said, you know what? I'm going to become a lawyer now. And that is the time during the course of this breakdown of this dastardly marriage, in the middle of it all, my being an Air Force officer's kid just resurfaced, and I said, I'm going to study law. It took me a really long time to complete my course because, it was hard and I had very little money. I had to do odd jobs to put together things, but I completed it. And I actually completed my law whilst my divorce was going on. And the day I got the decree was a month later. I got my exam result and I had cleared. So I think those are really, really significant things which happen to you. And like I said, you really don't know where life's going to take you. And we all came from this family background where you just had to be brave and conquer the world, and nothing could keep you down. And you just got on with the job. So I think that's where I decided that, okay, I'm just going to be a lawyer. And I saw a number of women in my position, and I said, I think I need to help these women. And that's where my journey as a true lawyer commenced. And I never ever forget that there are a lot of Vandanas out there, and I never forget that. So however much I may grow, I still keep in mind that there's someone out there who needs my help and who can benefit and make a new life for herself.
That's really inspiring, Vandana. And I think it's an important thing for all of us to hear. So thank you so much for sharing. I wonder if we could talk about what marriage means in South Asian culture, in our culture. What does it mean?
I think marriage is the ultimate life goal, even now in this day and age. Once you're married, everything else is forgotten or forgiven. So everybody knows you as Mrs. So and so. Why should you be a Mrs. So and so? You always question that why can't he be a Mr. So and so, which is your surname?
Exactly.
So I think the marriage is not the journey, it is the ultimate culmination. Once you achieve that, you have attained nirvana in this country. And if you are married to a rich man, especially for women, oh my goodness, it's a double nirvana. And it's the physical manifestation, like I always say in marriage, is a band baja barat, which is essentially, a lot of hullabaloo around the whole culture of marriage. And everybody is in your marriage. The whole world is in your marriage. And I think that in itself is what marriage means. And, they always say to women that, you need to shut your previous life when you come into this life. So it is kind of like a rebirth where you are part of your husband's family and your previous life in a way ceases to exist. And not much has changed in the past 40, 50 years, or even from what you hear earlier. So the aim is to get a nice rich guy, have children, and that is the end of your life. That is what you were born to do. But I'm afraid, they didn't bargain for women like us.
They didn't. Absolutely.
So we are trying to change that,
Yeah.
one tiny step at a time.
Yeah. There was something really interesting you said when we spoke on the phone the last time. And you were saying, how women are geared to marriage, like from the minute we're born, we're just brought up to be married. And then marriage is kind of presented as this kind of answer to all of life's problems. I remember you saying to me, are you depressed? Get married. Is there a recession? Get married. I thought it was quite funny and really poignant and really apt, in our society.
That's true. It's like I said, by Indian standards, I'm extremely fair. So, the whole thing is that every time my aunts would come over, my mother's sisters, they'd say, "Oh, you'll not have any problem in getting married because you're fair." So, so the whole thing is, if you're fair, you're lovely, and you've achieved some kind of sort of genetic bonanza. It's like a lottery, You're so lucky or fair. I could have the worst features on earth. It's another thing I don't. But the thing is that I could have like horrible features, but if I'm fair, everything is forgiven. And marriage is recession proof. People are getting married during the COVID also. People are getting married in the lockdown. People are desperate to get married. It's one of those things that you need to, it's like a high calorie meal. You need to taste it. It may be good or bad for you, but you need at least a bite of it. And it's definitely seen as the ultimate achievement. And also it's seen as a solution to all your problems. And, it's the same with children. And I remember when my mother, when they were growing up, they had a cousin who was, euphemistically putting, not very nice looking, and she had a bad nature too. So my mom used to joke with me, when she was getting married and they were exchanging the garlands. She said all the cousins at the back kept on muttering in Hindi, which I will translate in English, that now my problem is your problem. Now my problem is your problem. Now my problem is your problem. It was brutal. So it was like they got rid of the cousin. Now she was the husband and his family's problem. Crazy. So
It really
it's one of those things that everyone in the South East Asian culture and the South Asian culture needs to do. And, you get about it, you're preparing for it from day one, and you better achieve that. That's one finish line you need to cross. And if you beat Usain Bolt in that, well, you're applauded. So the younger you get married, the better off you are.
The better. I got divorced a few years ago. That's when I started thinking about the fact that there wasn't any space for divorce in our culture. We all love a big Indian wedding. There are pre-wedding rituals, haldi ceremonies, and games where we hide the groom's shoes and demand money to return them. There are elaborate wedding ceremonies and 5-day-long feasts. There are wedding dances and silly games for the guests. But that's where it ends. What happens when a marriage finishes? When we go down the divorce route? There is literally nothing in our culture for that. It is like something we all have to do, isn't it? Like that's what we're trained to do, particularly as a woman. If you're not married, like what is your worth? Nothing.
Yes.
Is kind of what we're told, isn't it? Subliminally and overtly, actually.
And they also ask you, what happened? Why aren't you getting married? Do you have a boyfriend? Are your parents not agreeing? Should I talk to them? And all careers are just written off. Even if you work 12 hours a day, I've written 2 books. My 3rd book I'm writing. That's also done. The 4th one is also done, but it's something that I'm doing to keep myself busy. It is not a career. But if I get married, that's a full-time career. I had cousins and all giving me these vague errands saying, no, you can do it. You're not married. So the implication being that, basically you're useless. It's like you're half a papaya. And the bad part of the papaya, which is like just like the cover of the papaya, which you can't eat, or the seeds, which you can't eat. So you need to get married. You're defined by marriage. See the way we even change our surname. When I refuse to change my surname, saying that it's not really the law, that I need to change my surname. But they say, your passport, it will be a nightmare. Bank accounts, it will be a nightmare. PAN card, it will be a nightmare. I say, but it gives my father's name. It doesn't take away from that. But no, everything. It is like, a long time ago in the Manusmriti, they said you become a chattel. Women are chattel. You are defined by your ownership. And not only in smaller towns, but even in big cities, it's the same. And make no mistake, in a lot of wealthy families, this still persists. And they still have this horrendous concept of, I'm going to use the Hindi word for that and I'll explain it, of kharchi, which means like a pocket money that you give a woman for running the house. It's like, why would you do that? And I know super rich families who are doing that to their daughters-in-law day in and day out. And the women don't have a choice. And if they ask for money separately, they say, oh, but we provide for everything. Why do you need money for what? I may just want to go to Paris and have a cupcake. I need money for that. And I don't need to take my mother-in-law's permission for that. So everything is controlled. And especially in marriage, your identity is expected to disappear, if not merge. And financially, basically, you control nothing. So that is where I think the big kicker comes in.
So if marriage occupies this massive space in our lives, where does divorce fit in our culture?
You do know that I'm evil, right? Because I'm a divorce lawyer. So I have people who troll me on Twitter and also send me nasty messages on Facebook saying that you are causing divorces, and they believe it. And they say you are bringing Western culture into the country because divorce is not an Indian concept.
Yes.
I go to gatherings, and the minute people find out I'm a divorce lawyer, I'm the one who they want to talk in corners to, and they'll discuss Actually, my friend is going through
Not
this. Of
me,
course,
my
of course,
friend.
I know it's you. So how do you know about your friend's sex life so much? How do you know about her internal feelings that she felt devalued? Come on. So divorce pretty much has no place in our life. We like to pretend divorce is the emperor's new clothes, till a divorce lawyer comes out and says, hey, the emperor's not wearing clothes, which actually means, hey, your marriage is broken. You need to take an action. And not much has changed. I mean, I've spoken to so many women during the course of my research for my books. And, divorce in the 50s, it still quite resembles divorce in the 90s. The 90s divorce resembles divorce as in today, as in 2021. Not much has changed. There's still quite a bit of stigma. And the worst is the lack of preparedness for divorce. And I keep telling people that, look, divorce is here to stay. So better get your divorce kit out and start prepping. It's like you take life insurance, not that you don't expect to live a long life, but what happens if something happens? So I tell people, get real, it's here to stay.
Absolutely. And it's not like a cultural thing. Relationships work or don't work. It's not like, South Asian culture, we don't have divorce or we don't have unhappy marriages. They exist everywhere. So divorce should exist everywhere as an option.
But that's the whole thing. In India, marriage is meant to last for 7 lifetimes. So if you remember a lot of our parents' marriages, and during their time, I'm not talking specifically about our parents, but marriages during their time. I mean, sometimes you just knew that this aunt and uncle are really not really together, but everyone just zipped up and never spoke about it. So it's not like unhappy marriages didn't exist then, they existed even then. But it's now that where we have chances to make a difference, that people say, oh, but the option shouldn't exist. It's like, why would you not have options?
As a young girl growing up in India, I was being trained for marriage from the time I was old enough to talk. I'd be told things like, when you're married, you can do that. Or, of course you can travel the world if you find a husband with an international job. I could hear women tell their daughters, if you act like that, no one's going to marry you. So marriage was the ultimate goal for every girl. Boys were being trained for futures filled with big money and massive success. Girls were being trained for one thing only, marriage. This is the message we still give millions of young South Asian women. It's not important whether you're a CEO, whether you've scaled mountains, whether you've saved lives. The bigger question is, are you married? So Vandana, I'd love to hear from you. How do you think divorce affects us as women, as South Asian women in our culture?
I think because there is so much of drama around marriage, it's the same around divorce. I call the divorce drama as there's Band Baja Barat, which I said earlier. So it is Dhoom Dhadaka divorce, which means like a boom boom in divorce. It is never, ever easy, because you don't have money, you're tied down. You are absolutely in no position to dictate your terms. A lot of times the families don't support you. Nobody wants their unmarried sister, because now you're unmarried for all practical purposes, coming back home to share in the family, let's say, for the lack of another word, in the family kitty. Plus, there is so much of stigma and there is so much of shame, because remember, our parents were born in different times where you were married for 7 lifetimes. And now, I mean, you have people who may not be able to stand each other for 7 minutes. So how does one deal with that? It is always tough. But like I tell women, have your divorce kit ready. Have your set of friends, have some kind of a job to do, which pays, which can put you back on your feet, and have people in your life who are non-judgmental. Have some kind of money saved for a rainy day, and do your research. If you feel your marriage is on the rocks, do your research, ask around who's a good divorce lawyer. You can actually go to the family court and ask around who's a good divorce lawyer. And most importantly, start upgrading your skills.
Do you think there's still stigma attached to divorce for women in 2021?
In India, for sure. Like I said, that, everybody thinks divorce lawyers are the devils incarnate. I am forcing people to get divorced. That's what everybody feels, So, and if you see our divorce rate, let me just tell you, although in the past 10 years, since I've started noting, earlier there used to be about 300 cases a day in the family court, about 20 or 30 cases per floor, which means 7 floors. So you were looking at 140, 200, 250, 300, and some of them are repetitive, so the same person can have 3 cases, let's say, maintenance and so on and so forth. Now today there are 80 cases, 90 cases a day per floor, so divorce rates are growing. Our infrastructure, recently the family court, they wrote to the high court saying, you need to help us to cope because our infrastructure is very poor. And we need to get on to more of virtual courts, So you have, I had a date on the 17th of April, 3 clients matters. I've got a date in November now. And these matters never got heard because of the situation we are in today. The court has just given us dates without hearing us. That means that poor person has to wait for almost 6 months. Give me a break. It's more than 6 months. Why can't we have matters which go in for arbitration and mediation? And all this is because it is only in India where you go for a divorce and the judge says, why don't you think of reconciliation? I have had a case which has gone on for 6 to 7 years. We are in the middle of the cross, and suddenly the judge, it tells the husband that, if you were still with your wife, then after 6, 7 years of separation, you wouldn't have to just come back home or eat from tiffins or give her money for managing the house. You'd give her your entire salary. And he tells the wife, you wouldn't be standing here asking for just bits and pieces of money. He'd come home, you'd give him a cup of tea, he'd hand over his entire salary to you. Why don't you all patch up? And he told both the lawyers, I don't want you all to say anything, so we are just quiet. And suddenly the husband and wife say, okay, we can give it a try. So after 7 years of a marriage, which is in court, basically a marriage in court, which means you're going through a divorce, you suddenly decide to patch up. It's beyond belief. It's surreal. It's Kafkaesque. So we are a country which is geared for marriage. Our
Not divorce.
marriage market is, our wedding planning. It is maybe close to a $5 billion industry. Compare that with divorce. In divorce, we are not even looking at $100 million. And let me tell you, it's not me who's saying this from a social perspective, even from a socio-legal perspective. The Supreme Court says that marriage is sacrosanct in India. There is a Supreme Court judgment for the same. That is why we also have a section, which is Section 9 of the Hindu Marriage Act, which talks about RCR, which is the most dreaded section, according to me, which is restitution of conjugal rights. So you can say, I don't want a divorce. I want my marriage to be restored. So you file for restitution of conjugal rights and you don't agree to divorce. That's why our divorces, for Christ's sake, my divorce lasted for 10 years. And this is just the lower court. So after that, there's High Court. I know of one matter that I'm handling, and it's come to me much later, but that matter is going on for 18 years in the lower court. And I keep telling
That's
that guy, I said,
ridiculous.
Abhi, enough. Why don't you
Yeah.
just call it quits? Because every Diwali he wishes me, Happy Diwali, huh, madam, Happy Diwali. And I tell him now, next year you don't have to wish me in court. I just stopped taking fee from him like 5 years ago. I said, you know what, just let it be. I'll just help you to whatever extent I can. So we are not a country geared for divorce. We are a country all pushing towards marriage. We also have 3 sessions with a counselor who tries to convince you in
Is that
court.
part of the divorce proceedings?
Yes, yes. Who tries to convince
So it's an
you.
enforced counseling
Yeah,
session.
it's mandatory.
What is it like, Vandana, to be a female lawyer, a female divorce lawyer in the courts?
Okay, let me tell you. Firstly, our family courts have a lot of women lawyers because, we call the family court the Rona Dhona emotional court. Because you need to have this thing, where you plead poverty that the judge can actually feel the poverty. So it's very, very emotional. It's like a Hindi Bollywood movie. And but having said that, I must admit that sometimes it's a little weird because you have these very old world lawyers passing comments on the way you look. Like they always say, "Oh, this is our supermodel lawyer. Please, I am nowhere near a supermodel, and I think I must be twice the size of Kate Moss. But everybody's twice the size of Kate Moss, you know." So, but so I mean, you can either get angry about it, but I just choose to deal with it with humor, and I say, yeah, I'm a supermodel. I never went to law school. I went to fashion school. That's where I learned. And he always says that, the judge just looks at you and he gives a judgment in your favor. I said, exactly. You should have gone to the same school as me. That's why you're not doing well. So you get angry, but I also laugh at their ignorance. And, things are changing because now women are not putting up with any of it. And you do know that, I do a bit of pro bono work for sexual harassment at the workplace. And I'm a part of the National Commission for Women, which is the highest body for helping out women in India, especially in matters related to marital and domestic violence. And I still find that sexual harassment is pretty rampant. The courts don't make it easy for us. And it is awful because there is no sympathy for women. The whole idea is that she brought it upon herself. So we haven't come far in that. And there's a matter I'm handling. It's gone right up to the Supreme Court. And now the judge is trying to strike it down, saying that you've only come forward many years later, completely discarding previous judgments would say that, well, hey, there is no time limit for a sexual harassment case. So, you're dealing with a patriarchal society which thinks that, women should be sort of not working. And if you are working, you do noble professions like, like teaching or running a play school. And, they don't think that if you've been sexually harassed, you should keep quiet. Keeping quiet is the sign of a girl from a good family in India.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yes, so it's that sort of a thing. And all in all, I don't find that much sympathy for women and for working women and for strong women. There is not a lot of sympathy. Like recently, I went through a personal turmoil of my own, and some people wanted me to sign some property papers, and that's the time I was pregnant in the first trimester, and because they jostled me and everything, and I suffered from a miscarriage. And for 2-3 months, I was in a lot of depression, and it took me a lot of courage to now start talking about it, because the men are not sympathetic. The cops do nothing. They want me to bribe them. I won't bribe anybody. I will not do that. So it's not like the courts have put my case on a fast track. So I find the same for women, who, whether you are raped, you suffer a miscarriage, you're sexually harassed, you are beaten in a marriage. I find that there is this whole thing, and I feel so sad for us that we are replaceable and disposable, and it is every aspect of a woman which is like that. And I'm saying it from a position of strength, not weakness. I mean, I'm not a victim, I'm a victor. But I just feel that, hey, the judge also, I feel, hey, a little bit of sympathy. And I'm not 20 years old where it's very easy to get pregnant again, but I'm not giving up. And maybe next time you'll interview me with the 2 or 3 kids running around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
This is like the first time I'm sharing it on a public platform, because I want women to take courage from that and say that, you need to speak out, you need to be women's best friends, and you need to value and appreciate yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that one. I really appreciate it.
So here I am, a woman lawyer in India, but quite happy. And
Absolutely.
if I'm allowed to say, I'm quite happy kicking ass.
You are an ass kicker. You absolutely are. I was listening to you talk on the BBC, and you had a passage about how you walk into a court wearing these 4-inch heels and wedges and, and all of these you're this rising above everybody else. And I thought it was absolutely kick-ass. And I thought, oh my God, I like this woman.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I just said that, I think Zara and LV are in business because of me, and I wear all their good clothes and go to court and if I can pick up a couple of Gucci's along the way, I mean, I don't mind, So I wear all these fancy clothes and I wear my makeup and everything and go to court because I feel good about myself and I do it for myself. And, I had someone walk up to me in court about a month ago and they said, ma'am, it was a lady, and she said, ma'am, if you don't mind my saying, you're the best dressed lawyer I have ever seen in my life. I just felt so good about myself, that, it's nice. Even in that dreary, dreadful, death-like atmosphere, you are able to bring a ray of sunshine, in someone's life,
And not only it's not just about wearing the clothes, you're going in there and you're helping women be stronger and move on and create new lives, So that's absolutely, absolutely inspiring, I think.
Thank you. And, I just feel that, if we all do our little bit look, we are all going to be down at some stage or the other. Look at you, you were just sharing, you've changed your life and, you're 100% happier for that, And hats off to you. And really, like a big pat on your back
so
and
much.
hats off to you, and I just feel that, if we all did our little bit and, we'd be able to make a difference.
Vandana, if you were to give 3 tips to women who might be in a difficult relationship, marriage, and thinking about going down the divorce path, what would it be?
Okay, I'd like to extend it to a question even before that, how do you know your marriage has gone bust? Because a lot of times we don't even know that our marriage is not working. I just think your biggest barometer there is your happiness. Where you are thinking for yourself. Secondly, if you're thinking that you want to be with your partner and you're happy being with your partner, your marriage is working. But if you are constantly on the lookout to protect yourself, I think your marriage, it's time to call it quits. I'm not going to go into deeply abusive marriages. Those marriages, they should be just given up from the day one. Because let me tell you, no one ever stops being an abusive husband. Ever. Never. And I joke about it in my book, X-Files, where I say that, if MAC came out with a cosmetic line for abused women, they'd make a killing, pun unintended, because we were all wearing so much of makeup, because we wanted to hide the bruises, but how do you hide the bruises in your heart? So I just feel that, If you know the marriage is not working, these are your tips. And when you know the marriage is not working, start shoring up your resources. And by resources, I mean your friends, your support group. If your family is ready to help, well and good. If they are not, please don't even bother, because families kind of have a very reactionary sort of reaction to what you're doing. Secondly, save some money. Put aside some money. If there is a joint bank account and you feel that you have contributed to it, even if you feel you haven't contributed to it, at least put some money aside for yourself. Thirdly, if you have children, start preparing them that you may be having a different life from then. So these are the three main things. And of course, always say a hello to the God up above, because you need him or her, you know. So I think everything has to be done with some sort of a prayer, whether you pray to a God or a spiritual being or just to yourself or any energy. So these are the things that I say, that just go ahead and please don't wait. Life is too short, and before you know it, you're saying goodbye to the world. So just don't wait. The time is now.
Thank you so much. That's very, very sound and empathetic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Vandana, it's been an honor and a pleasure to talk to you and have time with you. Thank you so much for being on Masala Podcast.
Thank you very much. And it's been a real pleasure. And all I want to say is to everyone that you know where to contact me. But more than that, I do want to say that my life philosophy is that it is better to elevate yourself than bring down another.
Absolutely.
That's
beautiful.
what I want to end with. And I want to say, this is Vandana Shah saying goodbye to you. And to be in touch, you have my website, which is vandanashah.com, and you have everything. So do be in touch. I will definitely write back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you've been affected by anything we've talked about in this episode, please head to the show notes, where I've listed some information about organizations which can offer help and support. I'm Sangeeta Pillai. Thank you for listening to the Masala Podcast, a Spotify original. Masala Podcast is part of my platform Soul Sutras. What's that all about? Soul Sutras is a network for South Asian women, a safe space to tell our stories, a place to reclaim our bodies, to tackle taboos within our culture, to be exactly who we want to be. Get in touch and tell me your stories about your taboos. Check out my website, soulsutras.co.uk, or get in touch via email at soulsutras.co.uk. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Just look for Soul Sutras. Masala Podcast was created and produced by me, Sangeeta Pillai, edited by Orbis, the studio, opening music by Sunny Robertson.
Besharam, Badtameez, Gandhi, hi, bad beti.